You know how we often hear scary stuff in the news, like shooting, upcoming recessions, or even talk about World War III. It can make the world seem like a really dangerous place. But guess what? In a book called Factfulness, Hans Rosling uses facts and trends to see if things are really as bad as they seem. He shows that our natural instincts sometimes mess with how we see the world and how we react to it. Now, here's the thing. In mass media, they need to grab our attention. That's how they make money. So they focus on the scariest stuff because that's what gets people to watch. If CNN showed a guy going around and doing acts of kindness, no one will watch it. So don't expect CNN to show you the real world. In Factfulness, Hans talks about 10 instincts that mess with how we see things. He helps us understand these instincts so we can look at the world more based on facts, not just scary headlines. In the summary, I'll talk about these 10 instincts and how being aware of them can help us see the world more clearly. The gap instinct. This is our tendency to divide the world to two groups, us versus them, where there is an imagined gap between the two. For example, most people think that countries are either super developed or are still developing. Turns out, most countries are actually in the middle, neither too rich nor too poor. And these middle-income countries are more advanced than you might imagine. Only a handful, like 13 countries, are what we call developing. So the world isn't as split as we might believe. Factfulness says we should ditch this us versus the mindset and see things from a more balanced perspective. The negativity instinct. This is when we tend to focus more on the bad things than the good things. This instinct comes from our ancient survival mechanism, where we are wired to pay more attention to potential dangers. But sometimes, it makes us see things way worse than they really are. Take mass media for example. It's all about catching our eye, and guess what? Negative news does the trick. So it often feels like the world is just full of problems. But Factfulness says, yeah, there are issues, but it's getting better. For instance, extreme poverty has almost halved in the last 20 years. That's a big win. So things can be bad and getting better at the same time. The straight line instinct. This is our tendency to think that things will keep going in a straight line. Like you see a data trend and you convince it's going to continue forever. Imagine thinking the world population will keep growing at the same pace. But surprise, there are 2 billion kids today and UN predicts the same exact number a century from now. Tricky, right? So the key here is to realize that trends are not always straight lines. They can zigzag, curve, do all sorts of stuff. Understanding this helps us avoid the trap of thinking everything will just keep going in a straight line. The fear instinct. This is our tendency to exaggerate dangers, making the world seem scarier than it really is. Even though the world is less violent and safer than ever, most people think the world is more dangerous now. For example, natural disasters today take 75% fewer lives than they did 100 years ago. Why? Well, there are fewer people living in high-risk situations. So the key here is not to let fear take over our perspective. If we do, we might end up missing out on some great opportunities. Let's keep it real and not let fear cloud our judgment. The size instinct. This is our tendency to see things out of proportion, especially when single numbers look really impressive. This becomes apparent when drawing conclusions from small sample sizes, which can mess up our understanding of problems and where to put our resources. To overcome the size instinct, we've got to treat numbers like puzzle pieces. Comparing data with different numbers and sources is key. Dividing helps us analyze rates and ratios. This is especially crucial when dealing with groups of different sizes or scales. The generalization instinct. This is our tendency to put things into categories, even when there are big differences. We do this for simplicity, but that can blind us to the real diversity within and between those groups. To tackle this, we've got to watch out for basic and exaggerated generalization. Remember, a majority can be anything from 51% to 99%. Especially when using examples, we need to be extra careful not to paint an entire group with one brush. In Factfulness, the trick is to question those categories and actively spot differences. This helps us avoid oversimplified generalization. The destiny instinct. This is our tendency to believe that past traits determine the destiny of people, groups, or cultures. This can make it tricky to see the potential for change. Small changes compound over time and can lead to big transformations. History is a good teacher here. While changes in individual might be obvious, group changes often take a bit longer. Forgetting that can mean missing out on the significant differences that accumulate over time. Chatting with older generation like grandparents about the past gives us a clear picture of how much things can change. The single perspective instinct. This is our tendency to lean towards simple explanation, often missing diverse viewpoints and complexities. Embracing factfulness requires testing our ideas for weaknesses, staying humble about what we know, and being curious about different views. Seeking input from those with different opinions is like gold. Factfulness is about keeping an open mind, refining our ideas with exposure to different opinions for a more detailed and accurate perspective. The blame instinct. This is our tendency to seek simple and clear reasons for why a bad thing happens, which often leads people to point fingers instead of diving into the complexities of problems. In factfulness, rather than just rushing to blame, we want to understand the deeper, interconnected reasons. Don't just look for the guilty one, look for systematic issues. Consider the broader context and focus on solutions. The urgency instinct. This is our tendency to act swiftly in the face of danger, which served us well in the past, but in our complex world, hasty decision can lead to trouble. Factfulness reminds us to balance urgency with analytical thinking. Pause, breathe, consider data and complexity. Taking a thoughtful approach is key to avoid mistakes driven by panic. It's about finding the right balance in a fast-paced world. So in summary, we cannot rely on media to give us an accurate view of the world. We have to be aware of our natural instinct and realize that even though the world might be bad in some areas, but it is getting better. By mastering our instincts, we can see the positive changes and overcome negativity. This helps us to have a more accurate and hopeful view of the world. If you want the PDF summary of the book, click the link below and I'll be happy to send it to you. Thanks for being here with me. This is Bahman and I enjoy sharing with you.